In this video, we're going to learn about reading strings. If I define a variable of type char and I ask the user to enter it and they enter a value, let's see what happens here. So let's say that they enter Logan for their city, and notice what is retrieved. All it gets is the L. That's because a char data type only holds a single character. So when we read in something of type char, it will gather a single character, store it in that variable, and then that's what we have to work with when we print it out. If we want to be able to store more than one character, we need to use a different data type. And that data type is string. And this will hold many characters. Now to use this, you need to include an additional header file. And that is called string, and that allows then that variable type to be meaningful. Now if I run this and the user enters Logan, it retrieves the whole thing because it can store a whole letter. It can store multiple characters. It can store as many as we want to put in there. Now watch what happens if they instead, let's say they enter, worked great for Logan. Let's see what happens when they enter Hyde Park. All right, here we have an issue. It only gathered the first word, and this has to do with how this extraction operator works. So the way the extraction operator works is it ignores any leading white space, and it begins gathering as soon as it gets to something that is not white space. So it begins gathering at the H, and it continues gathering until it gets to some white space. So in the case where we typed in Hyde Park, what we see is, in fact, let me put a whole bunch of spaces here. It'll ignore all of those, and I type in Hyde space Park, and when it reads, it's going to ignore all of this leading white space. It's going to begin gathering at the H, and it will gather until it gets to this white space. So it gathered right up until there, and it gathered Hyde, and then it was content and satisfied, and it stored that in the variable city. Well, this works if you're only gathering single word input, but once you want to be able to gather white space, you have to choose another tool. And so what we're going to be using is a command called getline. Getline is a command that will read white space. The general form is getline, and then it expects two arguments. The first one is where you want to get it from and where you want to store it. It would look like something like this. Getline, cin, which stands for standard input, is where we want to get it from, and we want to store it in the variable city. Let's go see how that works in our code. So instead of using this cin, what I'm going to do, I'm going to I'll comment that, well, I'll just get rid of it. So what I want to use is getline. The first argument is where I want to get it from. I want to get it from cin. The second argument is where I want to put it. So I want to put it in city. So now when I run it and they enter Logan, it works just fine. Let's see what happens when I run it and enter Hyde Park. And there, it gets the whole thing. So this is a way that you can read white space. Well, let's talk about the details of how this works. When I run it, this is how getline works. Let's say I enter a whole bunch of white space, Park. Notice what I'm hitting now. I type space, Hyde space, Park, and now it's sitting there. Now I'm going to type the word enter. What I'm hitting here is the enter key, and you can see that it moved me down here. Notice what it put. The city is, it gathers all of those spaces, Hyde Park, and then it ends. The way getline works is it begins wherever it is, and it reads anything, including white space, and it stops when it gets to a carriage return or a new line character. So as soon as I push enter, I'm indicating that I want it to stop reading, and that's what it did. It began where it was, read all of the spaces, and kept reading until it got to that carriage return. So it behaves different than the extraction operator. Reading white space is usable in many ways. But it's important to understand that where it ends is when it gets to a new line character. And that's the default value of the new line character, or that's the default delimiting character, the signal that it should stop reading. If you want to change it, you can actually add a third parameter to indicate a different delimiting character. For example, this getline command would be getting the information from standard input, or cin. It would store whatever it gets in the variable city, and it would stop reading when it got to the $sign. Notice that this is a character argument, and it's of type character, and so it begins and ends with single quotes. Another way to read white space is to use the get command, and this one just reads a single character. So if you do need to just get a single character, all you need to store it in is a variable of type char. So you create a variable of type char and then use get, and it will get a single character, and it reads any character including white space. So it begins where it is and it reads one single character and stores it in that location. There is another format there if you want to use this version of that same command, or you can just simply use it as a pause. What this will do is this will pause until any character is entered. It's important that you understand the differences. So the extraction operator stops when it gets to white space. It doesn't remove any of the trailing white space from the input buffer. .get reads a single character and does not remove any following characters or white space from the buffer. Getline stops reading when it gets to a delimiting character, and it removes the delimiting character from the input buffer but does not store it. So they each do different things to signal when to end and how they end. They also do different things at the beginning. The extraction operator ignores any leading white space, and it simply begins reading when it gets to the first character that is not white space. Get and getline read all the white space. So they start exactly where they begin and they read it all. An interesting part of this is that get and getline begin reading right away, and they may read a new line character or a space that you did not expect them to read. Let's go ahead and show an example of this. So let's say we have a program that's going to get somebody's age, their name, and their class rank. So whether they're freshman, sophomore, junior. Let's see how we would do that. So age is an int. So I'm going to print a cout statement that's going to ask for them to enter their age, and now I'm going to use the extraction operator to get this age because I just need to get it. I want it to read until it gets to the end of the character. I want it to ignore leading white space, and so I'm going to use that to get their age. Then I'm going to ask for them to enter your name, and here I'm going to be getting their name. Now their name very likely will have white space in it. So this time I'm going to use getline. Remember how getline works? The first thing I'm going to put is where I want to get it from. So I want to get it from the standard input. So I put cin, and then where I want to store it. And I want to store it in the location name. And name is of type string, so it will gather all of it. Then the last thing I want to get is their rank. Enter your class rank. All right, and here I want them to enter. Now, freshman, sophomore, junior, and graduate are all, none of them have white space in it. So here again, I can just simply use cin and store it in rank. So I can go back and forth between using the extraction operator and getline as needed. So here I think I've got what I want. So let's go ahead and run it. Before I run it, let me enter some cout statements. Okay, there I added some cout statements. Let's see how it works now when they enter age and class rank. So let's say the age is 21 and the class rank is sophomore. And, oh, wait a minute, what is it doing? Here I entered my age 21. It came up and said enter your name, but didn't pause. It went right on to enter your class rank. So it never got my name. It got my age, and but it didn't get a name, but it got sophomore. So let's see if we can figure out what is happening here. So let's look at them individually as we do this. So here we have a cin statement that says enter your age. So I enter 21, right? And it's still waiting, because it waits till it gets a carriage return to know that it's done reading, or it gets to any kind of white space. So here I'm going to put a carriage return as the white space, and it got the 21 and stored it. And then it went down to this getline, and getline begins wherever it is. Well, it happened to be right after 21 because the extraction operator ends when it gets to that white space. And the white space that's there is that carriage return. So getline, remember what it does? It gathers everything, including that getline, and it reads until it gets to the first getline. Well, the very first thing it's getting is the getline, is the new line character, right? It reads everything until it gets to a new line. Sorry, I misspoke. So the very first thing it reads after that one is a new line, right? Because I pushed enter there. So it reads that new line from cin. It says, oh, I'm done reading, stores nothing in name, and it's done. What that's called is an empty string. Notice that it doesn't complain about that. And now it's ready. It's sitting there waiting. Now it's at this extraction operator saying, go ahead and enter rank. So I enter rank and push enter, so it knows it's done. Oops, enter. And it gathers that and stores that in rank. So it stored 21 in the number. It stored an empty string in name, and class rank is sophomore. So what we have here is when we transition from using an extraction operator to getline, we have this carriage return that was used to end this enter that getline will pick up and read and actually indicate that it is done. This is a problem that you have to deal with every time you transition from an extraction operator to getline. You need to consider that white space that was used between them. And there is a command that we can use to fix this, so let me show you what that is. So before I do this getline, I'm going to make sure and get rid of that. And the way that I do that, it was with a cin.ignore command. Now cin.ignore will gather a single white space. It doesn't care what it is. It doesn't even have to be a white space. It'll gather a single character, not store it. It just simply says, I'm going to gather one from the input buffer and not do anything with it. So let's see what happens when we do that. All right, so now we enter the age, which is 21, and I push enter to signal that I'm done entering that. And then look what happens. cin.ignore gathers that carriage return, doesn't do anything with it, but takes it out of the way. Now the getline says, go get something, and it's sitting there waiting for me to enter something because getline was not in there. So now I can enter the name and push enter, and getline begins reading where it is, gathers Linda space Jones, gathers the carriage return but doesn't store it, and then it's asking, and then it goes down to the next cin statement, which is using the extraction operator. And now look what it did. It says your age is 21, your name is Linda Jones, your class rank is sophomore. All right, important things to remember. When you want to read white space, get or getline will do the job. But you have to remember the important details about how it works and be able to use ignore when you transition from using extraction operator to using getline. Make sure and use an ignore to read that white space that is left in the input buffer.